Hello friends, it's Kat from Meow, boku-undo. I just signed up for this real and definitely not fake at all subscription art box called the From the Vault subscription box. The featured artist this month is Eve Bolt. She's one of my favorite YouTubers, wow! Which is to say that Eve Bolt and I thought it would be a lot of fun to make each other fake art subscription boxes and challenge one another to make something. If you've never checked out her channel before, Eve is probably the world's foremost art scientist, constantly experimenting with new materials in thorough and unique ways, and challenging herself to find the best way to use a medium by adapting her technique anytime she finds something new. Her videos and ideas are really fascinating, and she's been a huge inspiration for both my artwork as well as for my self-confidence. Eve is actually one of the primary reasons I even started a YouTube channel in the first place. If you didn't catch the link in the iCard to the video she did of my subscription box, don't worry. There's another one down in the doobly-doo, with the links to all the supplies she sent. Spoilers! This box is awesome! First of all, Eve took great care in packing everything securely, which I appreciate since I've personally received some completely obliterated supplies in the mail before. The fact that even the pencils are tightly wrapped in cling film is a great touch, and I love that the clear plastic cap was taped to the brush to protect the bristles, which I promptly ruined by trying to place back on the brush while it was still dry. Oh well. There are so many cool things in this box, and I love that on the paper that states what everything is, Eve has even mentioned a couple of extra details about certain items, like stating which of the pens is water-soluble versus water-resistant. As she says in the Get to Know the Featured Artist of the Month blurb, Eve Bolt is mainly a watercolor artist, so knowing how these tools interact with watercolor is a high priority. I was also thrilled to see some of Eve's handmade paints in this box, as she inspired me to start making my own paints about a year ago, and I insisted that someday we should swap raw pigments as well as finished paints as we use different materials, and her investigative methods inspire me to discover how these raw materials can change the paint making experience. We never did, but at least now I get to try some of her paints, and that's pretty cool. Almost everything in this box excited me immediately, either because I had used it before and loved it, like the Kuretake Gansai paints, or because I had heard great things about them from other artists, like the Palomino Blackwing pencils. Eve also managed to magically know that I had been wanting to experiment with both toned paper and colored pencils, and her psychic art powers provided. The one thing in this box that I was sad to see was the Moleskine watercolor book. I've gotten one before and had a terrible experience with it, which was actually kind of perfect for this box because when we were talking about building these boxes, one of the ideas that came up was that there's always something in the box that is frustrating and not exciting, but ultimately usable. Eve didn't know that I'd had a bad time with Moleskine before, and weirdly, this book doesn't seem to have the same problems. I still can't figure out what the dud was supposed to be in this box because I love it all. And I'll have to do a comparison video in the future of my old Moleskine book and the one Eve gave me. Am I nuts? Or have other people had trouble with Moleskine watercolor books before? If you have, let me know about it. I'd love to see pictures too. And if you haven't, what did you like about them? Oh, also, those maple candies are super yummy. Do recommend. Just like a real subscription box, we gave each other a theme for inspiration. Magical art scientist that she is, Eve chose experiment as her theme. So I did my best to play. And, of course, being the palette nut that I am, I converted everything she gave me into a self-contained kit. Every single mark-making tool got used to make marks, and I tested them for their solubility with water since there was obviously going to be paint applied at some point. Sort of on a whim, I decided to swatch the paints themselves on the toned paper that Eve had put into her handmade sketchbooks. This proved to be an inspiring experiment. Initially, my instincts were to make something messy and free-flowing and super experimental on the Moleskine notebook by scribbling with the Tombow pen, wetting it, and then adding color with the paints. While I was impressed that the paper had none of the ultra warping and textural and sizing inconsistencies I'd had in my previous book, the tone paper just ended up calling to me. As for how the materials performed, those Palomino Blackwing pencils are nice and did well for sketching, but I tend to use a clutch or mechanical pencil most of the time and didn't really see anything special about these pencils compared to what I already own. Still, it's nice having gotten to play with them. This tone paper, by the way, is definitely not meant to handle watercolors and super wet washes, but it actually performed really well, all things considered, and only crinkled up a little, which meant it was still pretty good to work with. Eve's handmade paints are beautiful and re-wet immediately. I really love the sort of earthy tones of the colors she chose, and their transparent nature worked super well to help me lay down a nice base for the skin. Oh man, and the inky Kuretake set, while everything just looks black in the pans, has a lot of lovely variation and is far from flat and lifeless. They were excellent for adding subtle shading as well as adding intentionally dark spots, but giving some variation in their undertones. I especially loved the effect that the bluish and purplish ones added. The stars of this box, for me, ended up being the regular Kuretake Gansai paints, especially the turquoise and light teal one. Because both of those colors were super opaque, they layered really nicely and allowed me to stop worrying about whether or not I'd messed something up because it could always just be painted over again. Lest I forget to mention it, the brush that Eve provided was really nice. I prefer firm brushes that I feel like I have quite a lot of control over, and this one had a really solid flick to it. It didn't hold a huge amount of paint, but it certainly held enough. And I really appreciated that it maintained a sharp enough point that I could maneuver it into tight areas as needed. The Prismacolor pencils were also great. I haven't used any Prismacolor since about, 2005, and I think I took for granted how great they are because after using Crayola colored pencils for the last year, the creaminess and blendability and opacity of these Prismacolors is simply divine. That's not to bash on Crayola, mind you, because they really are pretty great pencils. That's to say that the difference between Crayola and Prismacolor is the difference between wearing a pair of shoes all day and wearing a pair of shoes with a gel insert all day. They're both great and do the job of keeping your feet from getting jabbed by all the things you walk over, but one of them is slightly more dreamy in the long run. Oh, and all three of the pens were nice, but nothing really stood out as incredible. If anything, the best one was the kitty cat one, and that's just because it has a cat on it. Anyway, in the spirit of experimentation with these materials, I ended up doing this silly little self-portrait in which I became the master of science, or something. I certainly feel like experimenting more, that's for sure. Might have to take these sketchbooks out around town and use them for doodling people at the diner or something. Thanks so much for hanging out with me as I try these surprising and delightful art supplies. If you haven't already, head on over to Eve's channel to see what I sent her. If you had a good time and maybe learned something, please like and subscribe. Until I see you next time, I wish you peace, love, and a beaker full of Diet Coke and Mentos. Bye!